Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Ron. It's Saturday morning. Hope you've had a great week. Uh, we'll start off, see if we have any questions.
People seem to be there.
Anyone, questions, comments, anything that's been brought to your attention this week? Okay. Um, I will start with this though. We Angela had a question about some puppets, something she saw on YouTube, and I went out and took a look at those puppets because I wasn't familiar with it, and I don't know if any of you are. And I see where someone made some giant puppets and they put them in a one of those old fashioned type of scuba diving suits where the whole body is submerged in a suit with the big helmet on and everything. So, but I did not see any real reason or even practical reasoning for doing that. I don't know what that was about. Uh, so but I did not see any type of connection as to any spirituality in it, or like I say, anything that really even other than entertainment that I got from it. So if anybody else is familiar with it, uh, you know, please feel free to comment on it. But I didn't see anything that I thought was relevant to what we do or what we're even searching for. Okay. But again, as always, we encourage questions, of course, and uh, and we'll discuss it. Okay. The other thing was on last week we looked at chapter 6. Monday we looked at chapter 6 of Matthew, and we were looking at particularly those first 3 or 4 verses. And what we've noticed was as we look at those, we were making the attempt anyway to connect them to the I am, what we had talked about on Saturday and Sunday. And what we were seeing there is the Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. It's talking to us. It is talking to us that you are the character of the Father. You and the Father are one, and you are more of the parenting in the earth. You are the example of enlightenment in the earth, uh, meaning that the Hebrew word for father is Abba, but in the Aramaic it is a boom, and it is father mother. So you are the balance that we are seeking. You are the balance that we have been seeking. So looking at that, we came to the conclusion that although we have our uh, dark moments, sometimes we have our states of depression. There are times that we need to talk to each other. Uh, we are responsible for what takes place. We are not victims, and we are not certainly not helpless to the things that we see around us. Some of the things that need addressing. So we may not always know what to do. We pray, we meditate on everything, and again, I think there is great strength in bringing things to everyone's attention and discussing them openly. So the thing that you seek from the universe, you are now the universe, and all of it is you, and that is the balance that we are, and that was at least part of what we discussed on Monday. Were there any questions or comments from that discussion? Okay. Again, I open up, it's a little 8 minutes after now, so maybe a couple more people have logged on. Do you have any questions or anything that may have come to your attention?
Hey, Ron,
Yes, sir.
um, I want to look at that seventh verse in that sixth chapter of Matthew. And when you are praying, do not use meaningless repetition as the Gentiles do, for they suppose that they will be heard for their many words. What does that mean? When it talks about that, is it talking about when you were meditating that you should not meditate on frivolous things, or not frivolous, I'm sorry, with repetition, meaning that once you have approached something and made your desires known, there is no need to do that again. You understand what I'm saying? Hello? You talking, Ron, but
You're on mute, Ron.
you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Pastor, I was connecting it to verse number 6. I think those two may go together. Verse 6 to me talks about, I recognize who I am, and being Elohim, the hallowed be thy name. I create space for prayer. I create space for meditation. I create space for enlightenment to enter or come to me, or for me to see it. And from there, that's what opens the door for everything else. So once I do that, I'm not into the repetitious type thing. I am the Father of one, and there is no need for repetition. There is no need to be doing something ceremoniously or religiously. Recognize who you are, and let that be your purpose. So this says to me that meditation is a purpose of the human who has come in, who has made himself available to be spiritual enlightenment. Meditation is your responsibility, and it is not done religiously. This is telling us how to do it. Does that make sense? Huh?
Suppose that what we are talking about, what's being spoken of here, is actually a recognition of Sabbat. Suppose it's telling us to be mindful, to take the time to meditate, or to focus on who we are, and what our desires are in terms of what the earth is in need of, what humanity is in need of. And by virtue of telling us about to meditate or to focus, then it is telling us that our primary focus is not to make sure so much that the people who are without food get food, as much as it is to make sure that we are focusing on the spiritual aspects of everything. And the reason I say that is because if balance is spiritual, and we bring balance into the earth, and the focus is on spirituality, and we know that we are one with the Father, meaning that we are the same as is the Father, then we don't have to focus on making sure that the hungry is fed. Why? Because our focus is on changing the hearts of humanity. If we go back to the time prior to Jesus' entrance into the earth, what do we see? If we go back to the various kingdoms of antiquity, there was no need to ask for daily bread because everyone had their daily bread. So this action for daily bread, as we said, it has nothing to do with the physical bread. So this whole focus, this whole shift in recognizing the spiritual nature of not only who we are, but the spiritual nature of what we are to do and what we are to focus on, actually make sure that everyone has what they need, or it paves a way for that. So this whole prayer, that thing that we call, these verses rather, that we call a prayer, is more of a description of what a wound does. And if we are the same as a wound, then it is a description of what we are to be responsible for in the earth. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Goes to me. Anyone else? Any questions? I also get the feeling that it talks to Pastor meaningless repetition as the Gentiles do, but they suppose that they will be heard for the many words. I also think it talks about the destruction, or the I don't want to use the word destruction, but the adverse effect that religion has on people who are truly seeking, is what I'm saying.
I agree with that. I agree that the Gentiles believe that the more they speak, the more things will change. And that is a belief today. If people did not believe that the multiplying of words would bring about change in their lives, they would not go to the altar to pray for the same thing over and over again. And the focus would not be on the words or how you deliver those words. The focus would be on the desire for humanity. So what Jesus is instructing is that is not about how much you say, but it's about the depth of your desire, your commitment. It's about not only your desire and commitment, it is about your sincerity to yourself first, and then your sincerity to humanity. Because if you don't sincerely believe who you are and how you were fearfully and wonderfully made, then it is extremely difficult, if not virtually impossible, for you to bring into existence the needs for those, for humanity itself.
Could it be about
Yeah,
also, in addition to what you just said, could it be about reminding us that we have to trust what it is we are? Meaning, I agree that we create space so that the universe can so that we can align our wisdom with that of the universe. And so, in not going back and back again, as you said, Pastor, with the altar, it reminds us that, trust who you are and what you are and what you're to do. And once you've done it, don't go back and revisit it. Don't feel like don't let that doubt creep in that you gotta feel like you gotta go back and revisit it. Trust that it's done. and the repetitious part of that kind of reminds me of that particular part as well. Just trust that it's done.
Yeah. I think too, at the beginning of this, hallowed be thy name. If we take this whole thing away from being the responsibility of the creator and put it on ourselves and recognize that this is speaking to us. The hallowed be thy name speaks to the point that you are a listener. You should be, the more you grow in enlightenment, the more you listen. And the more you listen, the more you move self out of the way. So to get to this point, what it is also saying to me is, if I'm always talking, if I'm always repetitiously speaking, if I'm always trying to impress people by how I pray, I'm not a listener, and I have no idea what the people need, what is needed in the earth, what is needed to bring enlightenment. So part of this being the moving of self, that the transition that you go through is being a good listener. It teaches you how to listen and how to feel and experience what is needed, rather than talking all the time. You don't get that when you talk all the time.
Also, the word prayer means the salute, meaning to trap or to set a trap. It also means to set a trap or snare. It means also to make an adjustment. Adjust our thinking and our desires to those of our woman of the Creator. If you think about it, if Jesus is saying that we are to set a snare or a trap, to ensnare what our desires are, then that requires some things. It requires patience, diligence, and watchfulness, meaning that if it does not happen when you want it to, you're patient enough to wait for that moment when what you desire has been ensnared by your desires. It is also saying that you pay attention. You're paying attention to the desires of your heart, but it doesn't say anything about having to return to the giver to express what your desires are. If I tell you that I'm gonna call you tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock, then tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock, your expectation is for me to call. But during the period between now and tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock, you don't call me to ask me, am I really going to call you? You trust that I'm going to call you because I told you I was. So if that is the case with me, being the human, then why is it that we feel like that we have to keep reiterating to our Creator the desires of our heart? Why do we have to keep doing that? I remember when Phoebe first got sick, I called everybody, of course, and talked to her, and I was guilty of that. I was continuously seeking relief on her part, and that continued for quite some time. And then I got to the point where I realized something. Regardless of how much I was saying, it was not changing anything because the Creator is not hard of hearing, and neither is the Creator deaf to what I'm asking. However, my realization was not so much that as it was by virtue of me continuously speaking about and desiring the same thing over and over. Every time after the first time that I requested it, that I was expressing doubt. I was expressing doubt that it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it got to the place where over time where I stopped and said, you know what? You need to leave this alone. Because if it were in your hands, it would be done already. So the moment that I said, you know what, I'm done, it's in the hands of the universe. I'm not going down this road anymore. I'm embracing whatever the Creator desires. And that's when everything began to change. When I took my hands off of it, when I stopped expressing doubt in the guise of continuously asking. So I do believe that it is, this is the reason why there are so many times our desires are not realized because of the mixed message that's going to the universe, the mixed message of the desire, and then the subsequent messages about the same thing, which is a way of expressing doubt. So that mixed message is, I want it, but I doubt if I'm going to get it, because if I knew that it was going to happen, then I would not have to ask anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we have to change the way we approach we present our desires, not only for them to be one with the universe, not only for them to be something that's going to benefit humanity, but also that we are not continuously asking for or desiring it, or verbalizing rather our desires for the same thing over and over again. Because once the seed is in the ground, you don't have to go back and dig the seed up to make sure it's in the ground. If you keep going back to the seed to make sure that it's in the ground, the seed never grows. And that's the same thing with our desires. I'm done.
I have a question about what you said. I can't remember where it is, but somewhere in the scripture it talks about pray without ceasing. And talk about that part of it, because just like what you're saying, so whether someone is ill or something, that we're praying on somebody else's behalf, or even something for ourselves, part of my, I guess, misunderstanding has been keeping it fresh, keep praying about it, praying without ceasing, or praying, I don't know, but do you see what I'm saying? Some kind of way, maybe that was misinterpreted, and
Excuse me.
yeah, that may have been part of what our confusion has been as well.
We're praying without ceasing is something that where Paul wrote that we should pray without ceasing. That means that we should be in a continuous state of meditation. In other words, we should be, we are supposed to be in a meditative state at all times, meaning that we are to be as Jesus was when he came to a room, and that is, we know that we are one with the universe. We know that by saying that we are one with it, by believing that we are one with it, by acting like we are one with it, that means that we're the same as it is. So if we are the same as it is, then it is impossible to be a place in our lives when we are not in a state of meditation, when we are not in a meditative state. Because if our deepest desire is to continuously recognize and be aware of the unicity that we have with the universe, the unicity we have with the Creator, then that state of oneness is always present. And when you're in that state of oneness is always present, then you don't have to give any thought to what you have, what your desires are, because they are already known. And the idea of us speaking something is totally different than what we think it is. When it talks about the life being in the word, or in the tongue rather, and death being in the tongue, what does that mean, especially in regards to what we are talking about? Well, you cannot utter a word, you cannot verbalize anything without your breath. Breath is when you verbalize anything, is with your breath. So what's happening is the human has audible sound because of the vocal cords, but your spirit is the one that causes you to be able to make an audible sound, and that spirit is your breath. Breath, spirit are the same thing. There is no difference in the two whatsoever, none. So when it talks about life and death being in the tongue, it is what your spirit is focused on, what you, the entity, the spiritual being, is focused on. If you, the spiritual being, is focused on selfishness and greed, etc., then your words brings death to the humanity. And I'm not talking about physical death in terms of the cessation of biological life. I'm talking about spiritual death. If your words if the words that come from your mouth are expressive of your desires and they are for the benefit of humanity, then they become life. So when we realize that it is impossible for us to talk without the breath, or without our spiritual essence being a part of what we say, then we'll be more careful when we speak, because we understand that the words that come from our mouth receive life from us, or they receive death from us. It is predicated on what those words are, what the intent is, and what we truly believe about ourselves. So all of these things are within the same space of what we are talking about, today. If you think about the word Yahweh, if you pronounce it the way you are supposed to, if you use the Hebrew manner of speaking that word, then that word is 100% spiritual, because that word does not require any movement in your tongue in order for Yahweh to be spoken. It is all breath, and it comes from the depths of you, from the region of the solar plex that comes for deep inside of you. And when you speak that, when you say Yahweh, it's all about breath, which means that if you know what that means, and you have embraced that, that means that every time you speak that word Yahweh, you are bringing into existence deliverance for humanity, because that's one of the expressive meanings of the word Yahweh. So when we explore speech itself, we began to see the significance of who we are spiritually. And we began to see that the body is simply an agent that is utilized for the express purpose of carrying us through this this earth. And if necessary, I'll get into that a little bit later on. But does that help to respond to the question you were asking, Ron?
Yes, sir. Yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions about what Pastor has just said?
Yeah, good morning, Ron. This is
Morning.
I just wanted to respond to, what you mentioned in terms of prayer without ceasing. And I think that, in our experiences, or in my experiences, there's times where we or I felt that it needed to be a lengthy prayer,
Yeah,
or it needed to be a power hour prayer. But I think that reading from the Message Bible by Peterson, I just want to read this translation because I think that it gave me a much more clearer understanding in terms of just praying with simplicity. But it says, in verse 5, and when you come before God, don't turn that into a theatrical production either. All these people, I'm sorry, all these people making a regular show out of their prayers, hoping for 15 minutes of fame. Do you think God sits in a box seat? Here's what I want you to do. Find a quiet, secluded place so you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and honestly as you can manage. The focus will shift from you to God, and you will begin to sense His grace. And it goes on to lead into the Lord's Prayer, but that kind of really, kind of
Uh-huh.
hit me a little bit more in a clear and exact way in terms of how I thought prayer was in the reality when we talk about Shalu, prayer and meditation, and the importance of meditation, you know, because it's both the same, prayer and meditation is the same thing. But I just want to share those thoughts in terms of just praying simplicity.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to share those thoughts. Thanks. I'm done.
Thank you, George. Yeah, that was precisely my point. If all of this time we have not known who God is, or what that even means to say that, we look at something that is separated from us that we can never obtain. So how do we know that all of this, if all of this all along has been us and been in us, how do we become one with it? We're already one with it. We just don't know. And so you're right. We've been taught how to do things in a certain way, and even how the scripture is written. And we it's been misinterpreted and missed for so long. And as Pastor stated earlier, we are sincere in our prayer and the things that we desire for, but we've missed it because of who we've or how we've been taught to do this. And because a lot of times, I for one may have put degrees on prayer, how strong I need this to be, how great I need this to be, and that has also caused me to be repetitive in my prayer. So yeah, this is good. Thank you for sharing that.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Pastor was saying when we say Yahweh, it's all about breath. So why is it that Jewish people say you shouldn't even say the name? What is that about?
There are things that we are told by the Jewish people that has no basis in the scriptures at all. If Yahweh is not the name itself, it is an acronym for the 72-word name, 72-letter name. And Yahweh is said in place of saying, I'm making an attempt to say the name. There are many things that the Jews engage in that are ritualistic and has no foundation in scripture and has no power to them. They're simply rituals that make people feel good about what they're doing, or put them in a space where they believe that they are more connected to quote unquote God than those who do not engage in what they do. For an example, when we look at the ecclesiastical Bible, what is called Israel now, those who occupy those spaces believe that they are more in tuned to God than anyone else is. And those who are secular use that belief when it's political expedient. But there is nothing in the scriptures that tells us not to say Yahweh. Does that help, Audrey?
Yeah, thanks.
Uh-huh.
I think the whole thing, again, speaks to the part that we think God is separated from us. And to not utter the name is saying this is not something that I can obtain. And that's not true.
Where every religion that I'm aware of teaches us that we are separate from our Creator. When we look at the meanings, the verbiage in the books that we deem to be set aside for spiritual understanding, which means that they're holy book, when we look at them, we see quite the contrary. It's as though the ones who projects themselves as being the imam or being the high priest or being whatever have never really taken the time to look at what these words actually mean, and never really taken the time to understand what it means when it's written in the book that the words of the scriptures are a mystery. If they are a mystery, then that mystery means that mystery is something that's not readily seen. So if that mystery is something that's not readily seen, then why is it that we think that when the words that we read literally are the words that we are supposed to literally embrace, as opposed to understanding what's actually being said? So there's a lot to be said for what has been lost by virtue of us being submissive to those who project themselves as being spiritual leaders, when in reality they are academicians who have spiritual overtones or undertones. There are academicians who present themselves as spiritualists. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Any other questions about what we looked at in Matthew 6? Okay. I have another question that's gonna kind of take us in a different direction if there's nothing else to discuss here right now. My question is this. I can't speak for everyone, of course, but I know since I was a kid, we started having these, I started having anyway, these dreams or these visions of me with a mate and what that mate looks like, not necessarily physically look like, but the attributes and whatnot. So if you look at the divorce rate and how things go in this, not only this country, but worldwide, there is something in us that tells us or suggests to us that we need to be with someone, or life is more comfortable when you're with someone. Where does that come from? And it looks like no matter how, you know, whatever circumstances life has for you, that is that is the one thing that a lot of us, again, can't say everybody, has in common. So what that looks like or not, or to you, we all have this urge, this pull to not, maybe not necessarily be married, but have someone that is there for us and with us. Uh, am I off on that, or what do you think? What is marriage, or what is it? What does it supposed to look like? And anyway, I'll leave it there, and unless somebody else can have another question to add on to that.
Would like for someone else to express what they feel about the question you raised, or what they see in the question that you raised. Before I venture to say something about it.
Well, I know that for me. Oh, go ahead. I will yield.
It's you.
Oh, okay. I heard feedback. I know that for me, it's been sort of a journey. The things that I thought when I speculated on who my mate would be and what he would look like and all of that, and how I would relate to him and how I would feel about him, totally changed from what I initially thought. And as we went through, as we did life, quote unquote, as we lived, as we walked through life together, the challenges became not just my own personal challenge, but his challenges became my challenges. Whether they were shortcomings from my perspective or whether they were strengths from my perspective, whatever it was, did not affect only him, but affected me as well. And so part of what I was thinking is, you know, this would be I would have safety in my environment. I would have that I would be taken care of. All of the things that we might have thought was what marriage was. I found that my safety in terms of feeling safe and secure did not rest with the idea I had of my mate. I had to come to the knowledge that it rests in my spiritual relationship with the Creator. And once I settled that in me, I no longer put unexpected expectations, or I had to work through those unexpected expectations I was putting on my mate. That you're there to make me happy. You're there to keep me safe and secure. You're there to protect me. You're there to provide for me. Blah blah blah.
How did you come to that conclusion, Bart?
It was a journey. It was things, expectations that I thought. For instance, my husband and I were separated several times. There were things that happened, and in those separations, when I thought, well, this is it, then I'm on here, I'm out here by myself, alone, etc. Is when I became closer to the genuine me that I am, and then I learned, well, you know what? That's what this is about. I've been thinking that externally, I had to have all of this from my husband in order to make me feel like who I was or who I am. And it's even in those trials that we had in our marriage that I came to the conclusion, because I was with myself. I didn't have the distractions or arguments or anything like that. I came to the conclusion that it is within me to be at peace regardless. and it was those circumstances and those trials that could either drive you away from who you really are spiritually, or they can draw you closer. And those are the kinds of things that drew me closer. I don't quite know, Ron, exactly how everything
Yeah.
melded.
Yeah.
And when we were together again in those separations, then my expectations changed. My expectations became, I need to be at peace regardless of what's happening. I need to be at peace. And that meant that I related to him differently then. I no longer belittled him as I was wont to do when I was made angry. I simply drew apart and said, okay. It's like letting the flame die out. Okay, if I don't give it any fuel, where's it going? And so those are the kinds of things I learned by learning or becoming aware of who I was. And so all of those knight in shining armor kinds of things that we kind of learned when we were younger, and Black folk know that there weren't no knights in shining armor for us anyway. So on top of that, I had all of these expectations. That's how I began to. I had to become aware of me first, and through it all, becoming aware of me caused me to relate differently, which caused then him to relate differently to me. So at the risk of being repetitious, I don't quite know how to formulate all of the words, but I knew that in becoming more aware of me, I became more aware of him and what our relationship was. Now our relationship is complementary. There are times when I don't feel like being bothered. He understands that. There are times when he doesn't feel like being bothered. And I understand that, and I give him space.
Yeah.
I give him space to do what he needs to be, to balance out himself. And so I don't tie it all to a shortfall on my part or to a shortfall on his part. So now we're in a complementary kind of relationship where sometimes I'm his strength and a lot of times he's my strength.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Whoever was speaking can go ahead.
No, go ahead, George.
Oh, thank you, Reverend Richard. Just in life in general, once you know what your role is, or you got a pretty good understanding of what your role is, you know what your identity is. In my animal kingdom, with the people, all right, Mama, with the people who I deal with, I know my role. And in knowing my role, I know the roles of others. The thing about identity as it relates to marriage, if your identity comes by way of your spouse, then you have no identity. If your identity comes by being affiliated with Greater New Faith and Foundation, you may not have any identity. You have to know what your role is. And once you know what your role is, you become divine. You understand your purpose. So in every aspect of life, what is your role in your animal kingdom? What is your role in the workplace? What is your role in the community? What is your role when you go to the barbershop or the beauty parlor? Once you know what your role is, you have a better understanding of your identity, and people will somewhat have an idea of how you maneuver, how you think. So in marriage, you got to know role.
Well, George, let me stop you for a minute and ask you something. I hear what you're saying, and I think I know what you're trying to say, but don't your roles change even in marriage? What no, I go to the barbershop Saturday and I go to the barbershop 2 weeks later. My roles change, even in your child rearing, right? I hear what you're saying, and that's part of what Barbara was saying, this thing, the journey is an evolution, and we evolving into something or someone all the time. So when you say roles, am I understanding that to mean what do you mean when you say role? My role change.
Well,
It's not a concrete thing, right?
will a role change in terms of growth, and will a role change in terms of not growing? Yes, I believe so. And I also believe that once you find out what your identity is and what your role is in something, now you're more plausible to be conducive that your role has to change. Now you have to be the support dog that supports the lead dog. So roles do change. It's not concrete. All I'm saying is, and thank you for bringing it up, if you don't know what your role is and you don't know what your identity is, you ain't going to be conducive to change because you don't know what your role is. So roles do change. Roles may not change. Just know who you are, what strengths you bring to the table, and develop from that point. You develop your identity. So roles gonna change. Yet when you know your purpose and you have somewhat of an idea of what your identity is, you're more plausible to be conducive if the roles reverse. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good morning, family. I would like to make a comment. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Okay, I just want to tell Barbara, thank you for your honesty about your relationship. You didn't have to share that with us, and I do appreciate that. And a lot of times we're not honest with ourselves or our mates, and the relationship suffers. And when you start being true to who you are and being truthful about things, then for some reason things just start ironing out. I realized when my mom passed that if you're with me, if my mom passed, I can let about anything go because my mom was one of the closest persons to me. And I realized when you let things go, things always come back the way they should be. It will come to you. So I just wanted to say, I appreciate your honesty because a lot of times we're not truthful to ourselves and we just lie, and things suffer. We suffer. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you, Evan.
Yeah, I too appreciate your honesty. And that's one of the things I've come to really, really love about what we do. This community that we are on the phone, and we don't recognize how big this community is because this goes online, this goes out there. So I appreciate that too, the truthfulness and the revealing of things, and even how we have evolved as a family and individually. I have a great appreciation for that. This is a question that I guess I've had for a while now, because a lot of what look at my life, I can say I should have zigged when I zagged, or I should have done this or that, and you know, even I was married for 7 years and it's a failed marriage, and it wasn't a bad marriage, but it didn't last, right? So I think a lot of it was a lack of courage, meaning we did not work as hard as we should have to save it. The other part of it is, you know, whether I look at my life and say, you should have zigged when you zagged, or whatever, you know what I mean? The decisions I made, the question that answer that always comes back to me rather is, would I be on this phone if I hadn't followed the path that I did. So that was my path. And that was that. So, but the other day, Pastor and I were talking in conversation. He was talking about marriage, and he brought up a couple of things, and it really got me to thinking. And that's what prompted this. And I wanted him to kind of talk about it from his perspective, but also from yours. What is it that we see? And what is it, that thing that tugs at us, that we, no matter what happens in life, that there's a strength there that pulls us, that we see ourselves in a situation. And as Bart mentioned, something I had not thought of, marriage is something that helps you to see yourself, helps you to grow in the direction, if you are seeking truth, So, but anyone else before Pastor? I'm hoping he talks about it from the perspective that he talked to me about it. It's a couple of things he brought up, but anyone else?
Yeah, again, good morning, Ron.
George.
You used the term zig and zag.
Yeah.
That resonates with me in terms of just sometimes how we have thought, or how I have thought in terms of prioritizing my marriage. God first, my wife second, you know what I mean? My
Yeah.
children third. And when I reflect on this, it makes me still contemplate in terms of being able to understand. In the book of Thomas, it talks about when the one becomes two. I'm sorry, when the one becomes two, or when the two becomes one. And sometimes, again, in looking at it from both perspectives, it's like, you know what you can do, I know what I can do. But when we were talking about your identity versus your divinity, you know what I mean? I think that spiritually is like us being able to have some understanding of how it relates to us, because sometimes we all have had thoughts, what is more of a priority. But I realize that it's easy to be the one that you are, but when the one becomes two in marriage, now that's you know what I mean, a situation that we have to spiritually engage in so that the two can become one. So I don't know if that kind of relates to the zigzag, but there's times that we all have thoughts in reference to trying to prioritize, but more importantly, the purpose of oneness or unity, I guess, is the bottom line. So I just wanted to share those thoughts. I'm done.
Thank you, George. And yeah, I do see what you're saying. Anyone else? Prioritizing is as George stated, is extremely important. And I guess when you look back on, I look back on it, that's something that I probably didn't do a very good job of. But still, that urge in you tells you that maybe you're not supposed to be alone, or you don't feel like, maybe supposed is not a good word, but you don't feel like you're supposed to be alone. You feel like there's space for someone else. What that looks like, you never know till you feel it, but you have that feeling.
But it's not part of our journey, building on what we do have.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily going back and second guessing and pulling up seeds and bringing doubt to your mind again. It is understanding that life is the journey, and when I learn who I am, and if everything that happened before brought me to that point, it had its purpose. It had its universal purpose in a sense. Perhaps it could have been different, but when we think about the woulda, coulda, shouldas, it keeps us in the past. And if only keeps us in the past. So we have what we have is now, and moving on in the strength and the power of the awareness of the now, the us now, the me now. That's the secret, which is
Yeah.
not the secret. That's the power that we are. And so, yeah, I understand what you're saying. If things had turned out differently, you might not have, I might not know you, Ron. I might not be able to talk to you on this phone.
Yeah.
So you're right. It is part of who you are now and who I am now, who we are now.
Thank you, Ms. B. Anyone else?
Your initial question was what draws us together.
Mhm.
There is an innate the energy that draws us together rather is innate. If it were not for that, then it would be much more difficult for humanity to continue in the earth because there would be very little procreation. Also, if we look at it spiritually, could it be that we are being drawn together because it says that the woman was taken from the side of the male, or that if feminine energy was? Could it be that because we are in these human bodies, we see a male body, we see a female body, and our lack of understanding of the spiritual nature of it draws us together because of the differences. An example of that would be how electricity works. Unlike charges are drawn to each other, and they produce the energy that's necessary for light. So we are drawn together for spiritual purposes as well as physical.
Can I back it up for 1 second, Pastor?
Yeah.
You said there would be very little procreation. Are those the same things though? There's an urge in you for procreation. I don't want to get in,
I'm gonna get to that.
Okay, but that isn't the same urge, okay, that makes you, because wanting someone in your life is a vulnerable thing.
That's why we have
Okay.
not necessarily vulnerability. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay.
The foundation of it is procreation. When we talk about, first of all, let's say this: every relationship has value, whether you consider it a bad relationship or good relationship. Every relationship has value. Now, when we get to this relationship that's called marriage, no one knows what a marriage is. No one knows what a marriage is going to be. There's absolutely nothing in the scriptures that gives us a description of what a marriage is supposed to look like. Nothing. There's nothing in the scriptures that tells us how long a marriage is going to last. Suppose for a moment that there are people who, and I've said this to people before, there are people who get married in order to find out that they don't need to be married, respect to each other. And the way that the marriage relationship that Barb described is totally different than the marriage relationship that other people have. this concept of marriage has been defined by religion, and because religion has defined it, we have held on to that regardless of how much we know about ourselves spiritually. And we've held on to that because we have not seen anything any different. Yet we have to admit that every relationship is different. Now, if we were to talk about marriage, especially to people in religious setting and to people at large, we will find out that a marriage is when two people come together and make a commitment to each other. That's not a marriage. That's a wedding. There's a difference between a marriage and a wedding. A marriage does not begin until after that commitment. Does that make sense so far?
Mhm. Yes.
Now, a marriage is not based upon any concrete, I'm sorry. A marriage is not based upon any principles that's on a checklist. And you said earlier that you had this idea of what it looked like, and not necessarily physical, of course. That's the checklist that we're looking for. Marriage doesn't have a checklist. Even though you may have your own list, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to check those things off your list because you don't really know the person who you are married to until you get married. And I'm talking about the classical sense of marriage right now. The other thing about marriage is that 99% of marriages, especially in this country, I don't know about other countries, but in this country, 99% of marriages, of the marriages rather, that end is because of expectations going into it. And one of the big things that you hear more about than anything else is, what do you have to bring to the table? And it's not talking about love and kindness. It's not talking about mutual respect. It's talking about money. What do you have to bring to the table? And that is unavoidable, whether it's conscious or subconscious. And the reason it's unavoidable is because subconsciously, we have been taught that a marriage is about finances. How were we taught that? Marriage license, a marriage license that's offered by the government simply says that you are an inheritor of that person's property. And there are those who translate that also as, this piece of paper makes you my property. And when we look at each other as being property, there is very little affection in it. I'm not talking about intercourse. There's a huge difference between intercourse and affection. If there is no affection, then intercourse becomes a selfish thing. Affection is how you respond to that person, whether or not you are being physically intimate, or whether or not you're being physically intimate. Example of affection is touching. When you walk past someone, if you touch them, the look that you give them, the way that you respond to them, even when you don't feel like responding, or when they irritate you, the way that you respond to them. Affection is intertwined in everything that you do in a relationship. And if the touching, if the expressions of affection comes only when you are headed towards physicality in terms of intimacy, then do you really are you really the one with that person, or are you there to satisfy your needs? And when we say that, we have to go back to the checklist. If you are with someone for the express purpose of them taking care of you, or for them or protecting you, and that's it, then you are there for protection and for them to take care of you. However, when you go through the process of being together and you are there for each other and you become each other's protector, you become each other's provider. And I'm not necessarily talking about a financial provision, but I am talking about a mutual exchange of affections and a mutual understanding of how to strengthen this relationship. When that happens, that is a picture of this journey that's called marriage. Now, there are those who get married and or who enter a relationship and they are married, but they don't have anything in common other than the fact that they were attracted to each other. And if there is no affection, if there is only intimacy and the idea of taking care of making provisions, is that a marriage? Or is that a mutual relationship? Or is that a friendship with benefits? If you are in a relationship and you are being controlled, manipulated, or you are being used, that is not a marriage. I know I'm probably all over the place, but marriage is one of those things that is difficult to discuss because we never talk about it. A relationship has to be mutual. And when a relationship is mutual, it does not mean that that relationship is going to last forever. Whether that relationship lasts 10 years, 2 years, or 50 years, doesn't matter. That relationship, suppose that relationship lasted as long as it was supposed to last. Suppose that the two of you are together for 2 years or 7 years, as Ron said, for the express purpose of finding yourself. Or realizing that you have not found yourself. And after that relationship ends, that is when you travel this journey and actually find yourself or become aware of who you are. We have been convinced, we have been indoctrinated to believe that a marriage is a failure if a divorce takes place. That is not true. If every relationship is valuable, that means that you learn something from every relationship, whether it is volatile or not. Every relationship has value if you learn something from it. So if you receive something in those 7 years, and I hope you don't mind me using that 7 years, Ron.
No, sir.
If you receive something in those 7 years, or if you realize something about yourself or begin to see yourself after those 7 years, then who's to say that you were not supposed to be married but 7 years? We have put all of these burdens on us when it comes to relationship, especially a marriage. And we have not come to realize seemingly that in the society that we live in, very few relationships in terms of marriage are based upon are love, emotions, feelings for each other, desires for each other. I'm not talking about sexual desires. I'm talking about desires, desire to be one with, or desire to be together. That's what I'm talking about. Now, when there is a desire there, the question becomes, do we have a secular marriage or do we have a spiritual marriage? Most marriages are secular. It doesn't matter whether you have a wedding in the church or at the courthouse, it doesn't matter. Most marriages are secular, especially when they are based upon what do you have to bring to the table. Especially when the only attraction you have to that person is how they physically present to you. Especially when your expectation is that they are going to be your servant, whether it's conscious or unconscious. When we talk about the roles that are being played, that's played in that type of a relationship, there is no such thing as a defined role in any viable relationship. What do I mean by that? If there are defined roles in relationships, then those roles begin to conflict, and there is and it's followed by volatility in that relationship. What I mean by there are no defined roles in relationship is because every role in any relationship intersects, changes, or they interchange, or they're the same role at times. So there are no set roles in relationships. Anytime that we feel like or believe that there are set roles in a relationship, that relationship does not continue. We are obligated, if we are to be in a relationship, to have mutual respect, to be open to change, and to be nimble on our feet in terms of being able to to shift on the spur of the moment. Meaning that you don't know what's going to come from someone's mouth, but how do you respond to that? How does that affect you? All of that is based on how you choose to allow it to affect you. And this idea of being emotionally attached to someone the emotional attachment is based on what your expectations are. If your expectations are secular, meaning your expectation is for a breadwinner, put me in a house with X number of bedrooms, buy me a certain kind of car, those kinds of things. If those are your expectations, then your expectations are not in line with the spiritual nature of a relationship. But if your expectations are, I expect you to respect me, I expect you to be kind to me, I expect you to be expressive towards me in terms of affection, I expect you for us to be able to discuss anything that becomes an issue in our marriage or what the next step is. I remember when we got married, one of the first things that we discussed was our parents. We are going to make sure that our parents are taken care of. Do we have siblings? Yes. But the major thing was we recognized that parents are going to get older, and there may become a time when we have to take care of them, and we made a vow that that's what we're going to do, regardless of what the others do in terms of our siblings or other people in the family. We made that vow and we stuck to that. Now, what did that have to do with our relationship? If your relationship consists of affection towards you and your partner only, then that in itself presents a problem because you have a selfish relationship. If your relationship extends beyond you and that partner, then you are developing, if you don't recognize it, a spiritual relationship, not only with that person, but with everyone around you. Any questions so far? Got a couple other things. I'm gonna be finished.
Yeah, I want to back at one, two things. The role play that you mentioned, that's important because most people do enter into a even without being married, we have expectations of what I am to do and what she is to do. That's important to look at that again, I guess. And the other one is you mentioned something about when I was talking about the 7 years, finding out something about myself, which I did. I'm supposing that's one of the byproducts of this whole thing, because you get married so young, there is absolutely no way you know the total self of what you're going to grow into. So talk about that again, the getting to know self. And the marriage part, maybe there's not enough compromise there as you get to know yourself, looking at who you have married. Maybe it looks different than, that's the part that looks different than you thought it would look, because you're going in two different directions maybe.
Let me interject this. I'm nobody's expert on marriage. I just have ideas about it. Okay. When you said that, Ron, it touched on identity. When you are in a relationship, whether boyfriend, girlfriend, whether it's marriage, whether it is simply someone who you are in love with and they with you, your identity, you are not even aware of what your identity is. Your identity changes. Not only does your identity change in a relationship, when you are married or when you are in a relationship, your identity changes over time. There is no set identity that we have. If you look at the identity that you thought you had or that you thought you were 10 years ago and look at yourself now, there's a totally different identity there. So there is change in every aspect of a relationship. No one knows what their identity is going to eventually be, whether it's in a marriage or a friendship. You don't know. Because just as roles interact and change, so does identity. And we make a decision about whether or not we are going to make adjustments, to compromise, to seek an awareness of who we are in that relationship. We make a decision whether or not we're going to do that or whether or not we are going to be separate because we are so different. Barbara talked about the separations. Separation sometimes is the best thing that can happen to a relationship. because it gives you an opportunity to see through the eyes. I'm sorry, to see things through different eyes, meaning that you see them without the distractions of the presence of that person. And you begin to see what role you play in the issues in the relationship, or what role you play in trying to maintain the relationship. What things need to be done, how you need to adjust your thoughts and your approach in order for you to have an ongoing relationship. We have been taught that to be separate, to separate in a marriage is a bad thing. Sometimes it's the best thing that can happen to a marriage. We're also taught that the worst thing that happens in a marriage is intimacy. If intimacy takes place with someone else, if it's the male who has intimacy with someone else, then that is always forgiven. Well, not always, nothing is always, but in the majority of the time, that's forgiven. But if she does it, she's held accountable for the rest of her life. So when we look at it from that perspective, there is no balance in relationships in that regard. The piece of paper that you receive, the commitment that you make, does not mean that that person is your property. That person still has free will. That person still has a journey to travel, and guess what? The journey that person traveled does not necessarily include you at every step of the way, on every step of the way. There are aspects of this journey that I travel that only includes me. And that journey that only includes me is that journey of knowing who I am. If I cannot readily embrace who I am, can I readily, truly embrace someone else for who they are? Or do I even care? Am I seeking to mold somebody in my image and in my likeness? Am I trying to make you be what I want you to be? If I am trying to make you be what I want you to be, then I may as well marry myself. How come I cannot respect your growth, your journey, and help you become the person you desire to be, as opposed to trying to make you be what I want you to be? And back to this little piece of paper thingy. A question was sent to me in regards to the difference between a governmental marriage and a spiritual marriage. If the only thing that's keeping you together, or the only thing that's not the word I'm looking for, authenticate your marriage is that piece of paper, you don't have a marriage. You have a government sanctioned relationship. A spiritual relationship is not based upon a piece of paper that you've gotten from the government. A spiritual relationship is based upon, as I said so many times earlier, mutual respect. A relationship that does not seek to mold anybody in your image and likeness. A relationship that respects your growth, or if you, or lack thereof. If your opinion has to be dominant in the relationship at all times, or at any time for that matter, then do you have a relationship? Are you in a relationship, or you are a servant to the one whose opinion is always dominant? There has to be opportunities for each of you to look in a mirror, and that mirror is the mirror of you, and see who you really are. Why is it that people in relationship, for example, there are people that I know who came out of homes that were violent, that were volatile, and they entered in relationships with the same thing, even though they swore they wouldn't. Why does that happen? If you are subconsciously comfortable in that type of environment, then you are going to end up in a relationship that fosters that type of environment. So how do you avoid those kinds of things? The question becomes, how much do you respect yourself? Because volatile environments are not just environments where arguing takes place or where physical abuse takes place. No. Volatile relationships are also relationships where someone seeks to control you. One of the biggest dangers in a relationship, one of the red flags, maybe I should say, in a relationship is if your partner seeks to separate you from your family and your friends, it's time to walk away. Because if you stay in that relationship, you are going to be controlled, whether consciously or subconsciously, by that person. And then the question becomes, what is your identity? Do you have an identity? Have you lost a sight of who you really are? Do you know who you are? How different does it look right now than it did when you thought you knew who you were? So when we talk about this idea of marriage, all of these things comes into play. All of it comes into play. And maybe we need to talk about it more. Why? Because again, it's two things in this regard that we don't talk about. We don't like to talk about sex, and we don't like to talk about marriage. We don't like to talk about sex because we have been taught to be embarrassed by it, and everybody does it, so I don't know why you're embarrassed. And if it wasn't for that, you wouldn't be here. And we don't like to talk about marriage because we don't even know what it is. We can't define it. And we have been taught that anything that we cannot define, we should not talk about. What was marriage? What did it look like? When you look at indigenous people, you began to see that marriage had nothing to do with a piece of paper or property. We have to change our perspective of marriage, our perspective of relationships, just like we've had to change everything else. If we see a relationship with our eye, then we don't have to make efforts to respect someone. We automatically do that because that's who we are. And I'm not just talking about a marriage relationship. I'm talking about relationships, period. Because again, I say that all relationships are valuable. And when you become, when you are rather intimate with someone, you birth something every single time. It may not be a physical child, but you are birthing something spiritually. And in those moments, the person with whom you are intimate, how can I say this? Well, let me rephrase that. Ask yourself, why are you being intimate? Is it for self-gratification, mutual gratification, gratification of the other partner, or recognition of the spiritual essence of who you are, who the both of you are, and with an understanding that when the two becomes one is not necessarily based on a piece of paper. If not at all, I'm sorry, is not based on a piece of paper. When the two becomes one, the ultimate expression of the two becoming one is physical intimacy for the human. The ultimate two becoming one is mutual respect, understanding, and recognizing that there are no fixed roles in the relationship. Or openness to that person that makes them comfortable enough to talk to you about anything or to ask you any questions. With an understanding that no matter the direction the relationship takes, you're going to be there for them. What do I mean by that? If you have been intimate with someone and your heart is in the relationship, not your lust, but your heart is in the relationship, and that relationship comes to an end, will you be there for that person regardless of that, whether or not that relationship came to an end or whether it continues? Will you be there for that person? Now, don't get me wrong. There are relationships that end because of brutality. That's totally different. But I'm talking about a mutual ending to a relationship. Because the reason I raise that is because the one thing, not the one thing, but one of the things that you can never take back is when you are physically intimate with someone, because there is an exchange of energy that takes place every single time. That is not only an exchange of fluids, that is an exchange of energy every single time. And that exchange of energy should mean something to you, whether you know it, see it as energy, or whether you just see it as a physical intimacy. It should mean something to you. And if it means something to you, you will be there for that person when they need you, whether or not you're in a relationship with them, because they have given themselves to you. And that works both ways. Does that make sense, guys?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And we grow, thank you. And as we grow, what do we see? As we grow older, we begin to see relationships in a different way. Or, well, maybe I should not say older, but say mature. As we mature, we begin to see them in a different way. When we are young, the relationships that we've had when we were young, we didn't think about marrying anybody. And the relationship that we had when we were younger, if we thought about marrying somebody, what were the reasons for it? How many relationships that you know of that was entered into when people were young? And I'm talking about like 18, 20 years old, 30 years old, you were young. And they entered that relationship because they wanted to have physical intercourse. And they wanted to be able to justify, so they got married. What did they do? What they did, they waited for the government to sanction their desire for physical intimacy. So the government told you that it's okay for you to be physically intimate with this person. The church told you that it's okay for you to be physically intimate with this person because now you have a piece of paper. And when that physical intimacy gets to a place after 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, and you realize this ain't what it's about. So now what? Marriage ends, a relationship ends. So all I'm trying to say is this: there are as many understandings of marriage as there are of people who think about marriage or who are married. No one knows what a marriage looks like or what it's going to be. The only thing that we can talk about when it comes to that type of relationship is what ours look like, the journey we have traveled. Ask yourself this question: what was the prerequisite for your marriage? Why did you get married? And that's, of course, rhetorical. And then for you who have been separated or divorced, ask yourself the question: why? What happened differently than what it was when you first got married? Love has no boundaries. I have said this before and I'll say it again. The heart can't help who it loves. What do I mean? If you love someone, did you wake up one morning and decide that you're gonna love them? Or did the love that you have for them, did it manifest as you got to know the person? Did it manifest, or did it manifest based on other factors? Love cannot be defined. It can be experienced. So when you experience love, did you decide that you were going to experience love with that person or for that person? How did you arrive at that? All of those things are factors in a relationship. You did not decide that any more than you decided one morning that who your friends gonna be. You didn't wake up one morning and say, well, this person and that person are gonna be my friends and the rest of them won't be. And I'm gonna be closer, I'm gonna have a closer friendly relationship with this person than I have with anybody else. You didn't wake up and decide that. That happened over time. That's the experience of LOVE. Questions about that? Comments?
So, Pastor, I have a
have.
couple. I
Go
yield.
ahead, Evelyn. No, I yield.
No, I was going to say, so love is not about being controlling. You can't, if you try to control someone, that's not love at all.
No, that's domination
And manipulation.
and manipulation. Absolutely. Love is, you're going to think I'm crazy, maybe. Love does not dominate. Love is submissive. But it's not submissive to the point where it embraces abuse. I love you enough to leave you, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Someone else is about to say something. Thank you.
I was going to, this is Barbara. I was going to say just two things that have really not screamed out to me in this conversation, but really focused me in this conversation. Is, first of all, after all that's been discussed, if we didn't have these wildernesses in our lives, whatever they are, we just happen to be talking about marriage today. It could be a wilderness on the job. It could be whatever that place is. If we didn't have those, and if we didn't see that they've brought us to a point of change in ourselves, what's the point? I mean, so
Yeah.
that's what a wilderness does. It points us to us. It causes us to look inside, whatever inside is, to see who we really are. And the second point is that we've got to understand that there is divinity even in the wilderness. There is the divine, whatever the wilderness is. If we can't pull out what is spiritual in that relationship, and that's the wrong word. What is divine? Even because the universe creates openings for us, whether it's in a wilderness or not. There's still an openness. The wilderness can feed us in a sense. It can feed us spiritually if we allow it to. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of what is the divine portion of this wilderness. The outside might seem like I'm having a really tough time and this really ought not be physically. But what is it doing for me spiritually? What is the divine source that I'm getting out of this? And if we can see that even in our wilderness experiences, those things that don't feel so good, don't look so good, that there is divinity in it, then we can grow through that as well. So
Absolutely.
those are the two things that I saw in there.
Thank you. Can you ask yourself, can you be married without a piece of paper?
Yes, you can.
It's called a marriage license. You have a license to drive a car. You have a license to operate a business. So you have a license to be married. Meaning that you have official permission to drive a car. You have official permission to operate a business. And both of those, whether you're driving a car or operating a business, they have a framework of laws around them that you have to adhere to in order for you to be able to continue to drive that vehicle or to operate that business. If you have a license to be married, so what is the framework? What are the laws that surround it that you have to function within? And every law or that has been given, or every policy that we have been told that we have to operate within, it's a policy that's unrealistic. It's a policy that came from men and not from the Creator. One of the policies that's crazy to me is the man runs the household. The man has the last word in the house. Excuse me. I'm the man of this house, and what I say goes. Those are frameworks for marriage based upon the policies of this society. Am I right? Y'all gonna make me say, can I get an amen as well?
Yeah.
Yes, you're right, Pastor Jay. Yes.
These policies are asinine. These policies represent bondage. These policies are enslaving. These policies grew out of a male-dominated world that males have totally messed up. And they are still there today. Like, for example, we talk about this, the doctrine of discovery. And someone said that, well, the Catholic Church said that they renounced the doctrine of discovery. It doesn't matter. The doctrine of discovery brought us where we are and is still in action today, even though the policies of it may have been denounced. The policies are still in effect because people still function according to them. That's the same thing with marriage. The policies are still in effect because people still function according to those policies. I'm raising my boy to understand that he's the man of the house, that whatever he says in the house, that goes. That's crazy. You are rearing a male to fall in line with other males who think like that, who end up in volatile relationships, and who bring disorder to the earth itself. That's crazy. Our expectations, regardless of what area they're in, our expectations, would you mute your phones, please? Our expectations should be guided by our spiritual principles, as opposed to policies that result in someone being in bondage or someone being dominated. The spiritual principles recognizes, yes, it recognizes roles, but it also recognizes the interchanging of roles. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when it comes to the idea or the concept of what I say in my house goes, that's ridiculous to me. Quite frankly, I would rather be the silent one. The role that you play in your relationship, in your life, is the one that you're best suited for. One example is when I'm talking to people about marriage, one of the things I say to them when we're discussing finances, the one who is better with finances should be the one who handles the finances. It doesn't matter whether it's a male or the female. It doesn't matter if it's both of them. It doesn't matter. So when we talk about roles, then males use money to control the household. I feed you. I'm the one who keep a shelter or keep you in a shelter. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is respect and understanding that everyone in that house has a role to play, and those roles are interchangeable. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, Rev, I got about to go get my paperwork. I just gotta add this in. At one time, I didn't understand platonic relationships or the opposite sex being married with Monique. Did not understand it, and I'm kind of grateful for not understanding it because of where I am now. Yet the part that just disturbs me about it is when, by way of marriage with black folk now, we won't explore how that can affect the African American male psyche. And if we do explore it, y'all gonna say, y'all meaning Greater New Faith and Foundation, a certain percentage, he don't know who he is. So that's the part that just disturbs me about
Say that again,
platonic
George.
relationship.
Okay, I got you. Okay. I got you.
That we don't explore how it can affect the African American male psyche. And it can. And the reason why I know it can, the majority of you all, if not all of you, if your check engine light come on, your psyche is affected. And you know who you is. You operate in the I am, you let that check engine light come on. So that's the only part that kind of intrigues me, is that you don't explore what's going on in my mind, how that can affect the African American male society. Well, not society, but his psyche. So where I am now, I support platonic relationships.
Can I ask for an example?
would-
I'm not understanding.
I'm-
Give
Well,
me an
Reverend
example.
Richard, sound like you understand what I'm saying, Rev. You help Ron out with it. I'm listening to y'all while I'm gonna get my paperwork.
I don't understand it. Well, what I'm hearing may not be what you're saying, but that works both ways. When you say that it affects the male psyche, don't females have psyche too? What effect?
Miss,
What
well,
effect?
does anybody understand what I'm saying? Miss Evelyn, you understand what I'm saying? Or you don't understand what I'm saying?
I need
Hey,
to listen
y'all-
more, George.
What
I'm
I'm
listening,
saying
George.
is,
Balance.
what I'm saying is, when you're married, African Americans, when the spouse has a platonic relationship outside of the marriage, a female has a platonic relationship with another male. Sorry. How that can affect the husband's psyche, his mental
Okay,
state.
I got you.
Okay, now Reb, being that you got me, please explain that to Ron and explain it to the others, because that's the part that frustrates me,
Okay.
that we won't acknowledge how it affects people. Yeah, like I say in an analogy, Reverend Richard, your check engine light ever come on in your car?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did it have an effect on your psyche?
Well, it depends on what you call it. Because my first thing was, I need to get this check. And that was the end of it. Because I used to work
Okay,
on
then,
cars. But let me respond to
What-
this. Let me respond. When you say have a female having a platonic relationship with another male affects the psyche of her husband. Basically, that's what you're saying, right? Right. Does that not happen the same
sir.
way? If a male has a platonic relationship with a female, then does it not affect the psyche of the female, of the wife?
I would agree with that, and we would explore that. Yet on the
Right.
reciprocal end of that, we ain't exploring that now. No, Yet I would agree with that.
Okay. The other thing, why I got to be an African male? Caucasian males have a psyche too that can be affected. Caucasian females have a psyche too that can be affected. So why does it have to be African males? It's men, period. Or women, period. Or husbands or wives. See, this is the thing that gets me. Men have screwed up the world already. And we know that. Yet, men get upset when we talk about how men have screwed up the world and how females have been pushed into a corner or abused. We always get to that place where we want to talk about, or what we say rather, is always the male that's being denigrated, or the male that's being blamed for everything. Well, it's not a game of blaming someone for something that they did not do. It is recognizing what happened and making every effort to correct it. and it cannot be corrected if there is no admission as to what happened. And it cannot be corrected if we are going to have the same mindset towards femininity as we have had in the past.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
My question is, and now that I understand it, thank you. My question is, does that relationship ever get to a point where that is repaired and her or him having a friendship with someone does not affect your psyche? Is that even possible, that your relationship can grow to a point that your psyche is not affected based on who your spouse is friends with?
It can be repaired, but the effect on the psyche is just another way of saying jealous.
Yes.
Now,
And maybe even not just jealousy, but what's the word? Lack of confidence.
A lack of confidence or recognition, or you believing rather that you're not who you're supposed to be. You don't measure up. All of those things come into play. Please understand this. The way you feel about it does not determine the relationship that the person is having. The person is the one who determines the relationship that they are engaged in. The problem with this description of the platonic relationship is that your concern is that it's going further than being platonic. That's the concern. Is that it, George? Or maybe you can respond.
Hey, I agree with some of you all.
No. I'm talking about this. No. I'm talking about specifically. Is there a concern that platonic relationship will go beyond that?
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Okay, thank you. Now, this is the other part of it. You have to have confidence and trust in that person. But also, if that relationship is gone beyond that, there is absolutely nothing you can do to stop it. The question, do you trust the person? And I'm not talking about the one with whom they have a relationship. Do you trust your wife?
Well, to answer your question, Reverend Richard, I trust everybody. It's the devil inside of people I don't trust. Yet I trust everybody. It's just the devil inside of everybody I don't trust.
Okay, okay, potato. It don't matter. With semantics of it all, you don't trust them. Now, the question becomes, why you don't trust them? Is it because of you and you're projecting what would be with you? Is this projection?
And see, that's what we always get when we have these kind of conversations about that. Because if I come in the greater new faith and say, hey, Reb, this Puerto Rican Jesus, this is my conversation wife, I would hope you pull me to the side and say, hey, George, you can't be saying that. Yet when we talk about that particular conversation, it's always minimizing the African-American male, his experience. And since we're talking about marriage, you do know our divorce rate is 4 times higher than our marriage. We're the only group of people that lead that. For your own information.
But whoa. That's because we don't know what marriage is, and our foundation for marriages are totally antithetical to spirituality.
Not all of it, Reverend Richie, but I agree with some of that.
I say the majority. I say majority of our marriages are totally antithetical to spirituality. It's based on church.
like I say, y'all, I'm about to hop in this truck. My whole thing of it is I'm not against platonic relationships at this point where I am. I think relationships inside the home and outside the home is very healthy, it's very needed. I believe in friendship in every aspect. However, I am aware that it can have an effect on the African American male psyche. That's all I'm saying.
And
And if it has an effect on his psyche because he don't know who he is, he don't trust himself, he don't trust her, whatever the reason is, it is the reason. I support platonic relationships. I think everybody should have them. I think everybody should have them.
And they are not. It is not just African American males. It is males, period.
Well, I'm just focused on that because that's what I deal with the most. However, I do have experiences with the Puerto Rican culture. I do have experiences with the Mexican culture. And if you all don't have any experience with the Mexican culture or Puerto, you really can't speak upon certain things of how they get down. Yet I'm just saying that's the part, Reverend Richard, that disturbs me. That we don't give any kind of attention of how it can affect. And I know for those of you all, some of you all understand what I'm saying. You're just too scared to say something. So, but nonetheless, though, that's all I had to say. Thank y'all for listening to me.
Okay.
Pastor, I got a comment real quick. I'm not understanding where the part about it's being minimized on the male perspective when, as a female, I step out, the male is losing his mind and he's in this state of whatever. But if he steps out, I'm expected to be understanding and forgiving. I don't understand where the minimization on the male end comes from.
It comes from male dominance. You are property. If there is an issue, I can do what I can do what I want to do. I can have platonic relationship. I can have intimacy, but you can't. That comes from the belief that you are property. That female is your property. That female is your property, and you do with your property what you choose. You treat your property a certain way, and that way you treat your property is not like the way you should treat a spouse, a friend, a human. This whole idea that the whole concept that George has raised through this speaks more than to just a platonic relationship. This speaks to how males respond to the females in their lives. This speaks volumes as to how males treat the females in their life. They can stand around with women and hee ha ha all night long. They can step over in a corner and talk to a female and say, we weren't talking about anything, but if you step into a corner and talking to a male, that's a problem. This is all about male domination. Quite frankly, I believe that we had to come to this discussion about marriage to get to this place where we are dealing primarily with male domination, because that's what this is all about. Marriage, as we know it to this day in this society, is about male domination. It is not about a mutual respect, a mutual understanding, a mutual relationship. It's male dominance. And every time that we begin to elevate an understanding of the femininity or the female in this society, what do we get? We get the idea, or that what comes to us rather, is what you don't ever say anything good about the male. But we are not saying anything bad about the male. We're saying that this is what exists in our society. It is no different than talking about the young African American male. Why is the attitude in a lot of the communities of the African American male that it's okay to shoot up somebody's house, or it's okay to be violent, it's okay to be a drug dealer, it's okay to do anything that you want to do, and that female is nothing to you but a piece of meat, a source of pleasure. That's all. Why is that so? It's because of the heroes. If you look at who they revere, if you look at what they want to be, if you look at who they know the most about in terms of males, African-American males, the ones that they revere, the ones that they respect are the ones who put their garbage out there. It's because they don't interact with African-American males who are not that way or who don't talk that way. You have African-American males who made it in the industry simply because they talk the talk, but they never walk the walk. No different than the males. Caucasian males have always dominated their female, always. Caucasian males have always kept their female, and this, no, paint everyone with one brush, I'm talking about culturally, have always had the female in a subservient position. She's eye candy. She's the attractive person who you have on your arm when you go to your board meetings or your Christmas parties. But that's all she is, your pleasure. We have picked up the same thing in a lot of ways. We have embraced the same things. You do what you want to do. I'm sorry, I can do what I want to do, but you have to do what I tell you to do or what I allow you to do. If that's not servitude, what is it? That is something that we have to remove from the midst of us. There will not be stability in the home until that happens. There will not be stability in the community until that happens. Just because people are in a household and it looks good from the outside, it does not necessarily mean that it's stable.
Could there even be a love-hate relationship between, and I'm talking about the African now, between the male and the female? I think in a lot of ways that there may be resentment because women are, if you want to look at it monetarily, they're more successful. I think there is resentment from the experiences we've had with slavery. You having to give your wife or your daughter to somebody and not being able to do anything about it. I think she's being resented for that. I mean, there's a lot of things that I think needs to be dug up as we discuss this and look at the honesty of it, how and why, the history of where we are and how it got here, if we're going to do it.
We could do that, and I would love to do that. I would love to do that.
I agree with you, Ron, that we can't neglect to mention all the racism that's created all these situations and all these dysfunctional relationships. So, yeah, I mean, there's so much that our culture is built on that has to do with racism and the systemic racism that creates situations where Black men are forced into the kind of situations they're forced into selling drugs, forced into criminal activity, whatever. So we can't neglect to think about the racism, the systemic racism that's been a part of how all this has come about.
I agree, and it's worthy of a discussion.
Yes, there is a wedge that has been purposely driven between the African male and the African female. I want to leave it with this because there is a lot to discuss at the time where we are. However, I would if we pick it up tomorrow, okay? When we started talking about a desire for balance, when we started understanding how the feminine energy had been dominated, mistreated, and misappropriated, what did we begin to see? It's right before our eyes. It's been shown to us every single day, but we miss it. What we started seeing recently, when we start talking about the dismantling of this system, what we start seeing is African women in positions of authority. And those positions of authority were from the beginning of our communities, meaning from a cable line to this up to now. We've had that. And the resentment of that by the African male does not come from the psyche of the African male. It comes from the indoctrination from the Caucasian male to the African male, because the women are out of their place. When Dr. Gay resigned, the first day that she resigned, well, we know what happened with those Caucasian rich men. We know what happened. But I read an article where this prominent African-American man who was respected in higher education made a statement that this is not surprising, neither do I have sympathy for her because of how she has treated Black males by keeping them away from positions that they could have had in educational institutions. This had nothing to do with that. So why did he bring that up? Why did he even say that? He offered no proof. He made name any names, nor did he name any institutions where this had taken place. Why did he do that? He did that for the same reason that an African-American male could be the slave catcher. Because he has been indoctrinated to hate himself subconsciously and to denigrate the female, keep her in her place. It doesn't matter how we feel about it. This is a Pandora's box that has been opened. And the reason it cannot be closed again is because we tore the lid off and threw it away. And that Pandora's box is the African female rising to the place where she's supposed to be, not where we allow her to be. And if you think about what's happening in this society, one of the prominent people, females, who this started with, now of course it started long before that, but I'm talking about where it became public. It's the lady, I can't think of her name at the moment, 1619 Project. She was supposed to have a position at the University of North Carolina as, what was the night professor? I can't remember what it was. And because of the 1619 Project, when the white males railed against it, they would not give her that position. And when she challenged them, they relented, but she had already accepted a position at Howard University and she left. This was a public beginning of a war against the elevation of African women to positions of authority. And again, this was not the first one, but it was the highly publicized one. And we are going to continue to see that. And nothing can be done to stop it. Because there is an Adam who stands in the gap between light and darkness and becomes the bridge. for the revamping of the attitude of this society so that it can not only be inclusive, but it can be guided by what is birthed from the womb of femininity. I'm done. And we can pick it, as I said, we can pick it up tomorrow because this is worthy of discussion.
Yeah, Pastor, that was Nicole Hannah Jones.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Good place to pause, as Pastor just said, and if you have any questions or comments, let's do it again tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., okay? Thanks
Ron,
again.
before we go,
Yes, ma'am.
Ron, before we go, I have a question.
Okay.
A comment, then question. I value what we talk about, what we put out there in the macro. A lot of people don't have what we have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Anyway, I tried to go online to PayPal to give, and I don't know if I went to the wrong website or what to give. So can someone tell me what I need to do to make sure that Faith Ministry get what I'm giving?
Oh, Janice.
Someone help me with that, please, because I value what we talk about. I can't get this anywhere else. So, yes.
Call Janice.
Okay.
Yeah, get in contact with Janice, okay?
Yes, sir.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day, okay? Look forward to
you.
tomorrow
Bye-bye.
morning. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.